Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide to the final coil of Bahamut Turn 4, aka Turn 13. This guide is a collaboration between myself and the free company Death and Taxes. Before I reveal the boss, I would like to say that it is a major story spoiler, so if you'd like to avoid being spoiled, please click away from the video now. So the boss for Turn 13 is Bahamut Prime. This fight consists of a total of 4 phases, lasting for the percentages or times shown on the screen right now, and has an enrage timer of approximately 14 minutes. If you would like to skip to a specific phase, please click on the phase you'd like to skip to now, or use the index in the top left of the video at any point. Also, a Google document with Bahamut's exact ability rotation, a tank cooldown rotation, and the charts in this guide is included in the description of the video. For this fight, I recommend an average item level of at least 115 to 120, although it is completely doable at item level 110 with a good team. However, everyone in the raid needs to have at least 6200 HP for all of the mechanics. If you do not have a monk for Dragon Kick, you may want to consider getting another 100 to 200 HP, and if you're a Dragoon, even more, about 6.8k HP. This can be accomplished through gear upgrades or crafted accessories with vitality melded onto them. Phase 1 will last from 100% until 76% of Bahamut's HP. For this in Phase 2, I recommend tanking Bahamut by the south wall where the party spawned into the arena. Bahamut has 2 major tank hit abilities in this phase. The first one is a flame breath that will hit in a huge cone in front of Bahamut. This hits hard, and at certain points in his ability rotation, he can perform this attack 3 times in quick succession. The second ability he has is Flatten, which deals massive damage to the tank and requires a cooldown, stone skin, and a loquium in order to safely survive the attack. Due to the length of the fight, you may want to use Hollowed Ground on the 3rd or 4th Flatten just to space out your other cooldowns, since it will come off cooldown by the final phase. Bahamut has 2 major raid abilities in this phase. The first is Mega Flare, which Bahamut will use about once a minute. When he finishes casting this attack, 3 different kinds of Mega Flares will go out. First, 2 to 4 players other than the tanks will be hit by AoE splash damage. For this reason, all raid members need to be spread out to ensure they don't overlap the damage. Second, 2 to 4 players other than the tanks who are not targeted by the splash damage will be targeted by a ring mark around their bodies. Every player with a ring around their body needs to stack up and take a more powerful Mega Flare that's damage can only be split amongst the marked players. If a non-marked player is in the stack, they will die. I recommend stacking right behind Bahamut within melee range of him. And finally, 3 circles will appear under any random player. When these disappear, they will hit for massive damage, likely killing any non-tank. Just don't stand in them. So you will want to stay spread out when Mega Flare is being cast, and then have any of the marked players stack behind Bahamut while avoiding the circles on the ground. I recommend something along these lines for positioning to ensure people don't get overlapping Mega Flares or cut people off with Mega Flare circles as they run to the stack point. Bahamut's other attack is Earthshaker. When Bahamut uses this attack, he will mark 2 players other than the main tank or the healers. After the mark disappears, Bahamut will do a rectangular AoE in each marked player's direction 3 times. He will also form a small AoE puddle under their location that, if stood in, will slow movement speed and deal massive damage. So for Earthshaker, the 2 marked players should go to the left and right of Bahamut, while everyone other than the main tank stacks behind him to ensure they don't get hit by Earthshakers. The marked players will also need to move as each hit comes out so they can drop the puddle and get out of it. I recommend dropping the puddle in a triangle formation as seen in the video. It's not vital for this phase, but it will be vital in the future for saving space. A few extra tips for Earthshaker. First, it deals physical damage, so abilities like Perfect Dodge, Mana Wall, and Keen Flurry can help mitigate it. And 2, the damage from each hit is big, so healers will need to ensure not to let the players die. Players with Blood for Blood on who are targeted should click it off before the attacks start landing. Bahamut will rotate between Mega Flare, Flatten, Triple Flame Breaths, and Earthshakers until 76% of his HP, at which point he will cast Giga Flare for huge raid-wide damage. I highly recommend a Sucker, Virus, and Sacred Soil to help mitigate it if possible. After Giga Flare, Bahamut will enter Phase 2 of the fight. Phase 2 will last from 76% to 52% of Bahamut's HP. In this phase, he no longer uses Earthshaker, but retains Mega Flare, Flatten, and Flame Breath. He also gains several new abilities. The first new part of the fight is that Bahamut will summon a Shadow of Mericidia at set intervals of the phase. These shadows must be grabbed by the off tank and pulled away from Bahamut. If they are too close to each other, they will tether and gain a damage and vulnerability down buff, most likely causing a wipe if not broken quickly. Here is a chart showing the range of the tether, plus the 3 locations the shadows will spawn in this phase, and what order they will spawn in. A maximum of 3 shadows will spawn in this phase. The shadow itself hits very hard, using deadly drive on its target often. Also, if it is not killed quickly enough, it will do a fire breath in a random party member's direction, leaving behind 3 liquid hells that will take up a huge part of the arena. You'll want to burst these shadows down before they can do that breath attack. At the same time as summoning the shadow, Bahamut will use a new ability, Flare Star. This attack will cause several dark ether orbs to spawn randomly around the room. A total of 8 will spawn over 3 waves, and will tether to random players when they spawn. After a short time, they will slowly hover in the direction of the tethered player. If they aren't triggered soon enough, they will eventually just dash towards the tethered player, ensuring that that person becomes the target of its effect. Touching an orb will cause it to explode and apply a stack of the debuff Suffocated Will to anyone within the AoE of the explosion. These stacks cause 2 things to happen. First, each stack will make the next dark ether that somebody is hit by deal more damage. While the first 2 stacks are okay, a 3rd stack will likely cause death for any non-tank when you touch the ether, and the tanks will likely still be in danger due to the orb's other effect. Each stack of Suffocated Will will also be consumed by Bahamut's new attack, Rage of Bahamut. For each stack it consumes off a player, they will take about 4,000 damage. For this reason, you want to try and avoid players getting 2 stacks unless absolutely necessary, and these players should get an Eloquium and or a Stone Skin to help survive if possible. I also highly recommend the use of Sacred Soil on Rage of Bahamut. After 8 orbs have gone out, Bahamut will cast Mega Flare again. This is mostly similar to the Phase 1 Mega Flare, except the 4th mechanic is now present. Additionally, a Mega Flare tower will spawn under a random player. It will call down a Mega Flare Strike AoE that deals about 2,000 damage in its location. This must hit at least 1 player, so whoever it spawns on top of or someone nearby must be sure to take the hit. If no one gets hit by Mega Flare Strike, it will explode and do raid-wide damage and a huge damage over time, wiping the raid. Keep in mind that the tower can spawn on top of the stacking group, in which case the group will stand still and have to take the hit. This means they need to be able to survive the extra strike, so timed heals are key to survival here. Bahamut will continue rotating between summoning a shadow, using Flare Star, Mega Flare, and Rage of Bahamut until 52%. At this point, he will cast Giga Flare again and enter his 3rd phase. Phase 3 will last 3 minutes and 30 seconds. During this time, you must deal with dive bombs, Mega Flare, as well as several adds in a turn 4 style gauntlet of enemies. First, we will talk about the dive bombs. At the start of the phase, both Bahamut and a Twintanya looking dragon will both mark a player with a dive bomb one at a time. Bahamut and Twintanya can spawn in any of the locations on this chart, the only rule being that both of them cannot spawn in the same spot. These dive bombs also act like turn 5's dive bombs instead of turn 9's. Wherever the player is when they are marked will determine the direction of the dive bomb, not where the mark wears off. So to handle this, we all stack in the middle of the room and look around until we see Bahamut. When the Twintanya dive bomb mark goes out, we all move out of the middle of the room to avoid Bahamut's Mega Flare dive. As we are spreading out, we look around for Twintanya as well, and then make sure we avoid her dive through the middle also. As stated, Bahamut's dive bomb is called Mega Flare Dive. After he does his dive, he will perform Mega Flare on the raid, similar to Phase 1. 4 non-tank players will be hit by splash damage, 2 will be marked for split damage, and 3 Mega Flare circles will spawn under random players. For this reason, it's best to assign players which way they will dodge dive bombs relative to Bahamut's dive bomb location in order to ensure there isn't overlapping splash damage, similar to how you see in this chart. Keep in mind that minor adjustments may be necessary depending on where Twintanya dive bombs from. The 2 marked players should then run to the middle of the room to split the damage. After this first set of dive bombs, waves of enemies will quickly begin spawning. The first wave will consist of a Blood of Mericidia and a Pain of Mericidia. The Blood of Mericidia is a weak hitting add that is only vulnerable to one type of damage at a time, physical or magical. He occasionally switches this immunity, so when he's immune to magic, a bard can DPS him down, and when he's immune to physical damage, the casters can DPS him down. One of your tanks should pick him up first. The Pain of Mericidia, on the other hand, is a very hard-hitting ad with a strong cleave attack that your other tank should pick up and pull away from the group. It's recommended to concentrate most of your DPS efforts onto the Pain, as it has much more HP and hits much harder. It does have a tail cone attack that you should attempt to trigger to reduce damage on the tank. The second wave of enemies will be 3 Gusts of Mericidia. These gusts attack and critically hit often and should be picked up by the tank who picked up the Blood of Mericidia on wave 1. If a Gust of Mericidia gets too close to a Pain, the Pain will absorb them, heal, and gain a stacking damage buff that will most likely wipe the raid. Once the Pain and Blood are dead, the raid can start killing the Gust while waiting for the next wave, which consists of 2 Sins of Mericidia. Each tank should grab one and face it away from the raid. These Sins auto-attack for a fairly high amount, but their main mechanic is Evil Eye. About 10 to 15 seconds after they spawn, they will perform Evil Eye on a random raid member and do damage in a huge cone based on how much HP they currently have. This attack will deal massive damage if the Sins aren't at a low enough HP, so your DPS should split up into groups of 2 and damage them as much as possible. Soon after they perform Evil Eye, you will want both of the Sins and the remaining Gusts to be dead, as another set of dive bombs is incoming. The second set of dive bombs is just like the first, so dodge it the same way. After Mega Flare hits the party this time, the Twintania looking dragon will come down and reveal itself as the Storm of Mericidia. It has a very large health pool and hits very hard, so a tank should pick it up and bring her a bit south of the middle of the room and be prepared to use a few cooldowns. The Storm has access to Plummet and Death Sentence, though with no Infirmity debuff. You'll want to put as much damage as possible into this ad as you can. When the Storm dies, it leaves behind a very large Neuralink that you will need at the end of the phase. The second wave here consists of a single Blood of Mericidia, which the other tank can pick up and bring next to the Storm. It should die easily enough. The third wave consists of 2 Gusts of Mericidia. The Storm of Mericidia tank should pick them up, as they should spawn right on top of him if you tanked her in the right place. Eye for an Eye really helps with tank damage on him at this point. The fourth wave consists of a single Sin of Mericidia, which should be pulled next to the Storm so melee DPS don't need to run around to deal the damage. Focus down the Sin. Evil Eye shouldn't be an issue here. The fifth wave consists of a single Pain of Mericidia, which the Blood/Sin tank should pick up and tank it where it stands. When this spawns, you should be about to finish off the Storm and the Gust, and you should be able to get a bit of damage onto the Pain before Bahamut does one final Mega Flare dive. Now that the Storm of Mericidia is dead, you only have to deal with one dive bomb, so as soon as the first marker appears, everyone can start spreading out. Keep in mind that the off tank holding the Pain can be targeted. If this happens, you'll have to be able to adjust to where you're dodging depending on where Bahamut spawns. After Mega Flare dive, finish off the Pain of Mericidia as you prepare for Bahamut's ultimate attack, Terror Flare. This attack does over 90,000 damage to the raid. However, it can be heavily mitigated by standing inside the Neuralink left behind by the Storm of Mericidia. On top of this, you will want Sucker, Sacred Soil, and even a potential tank limit break depending on how well geared your group is. After Terror Flare goes out, Bahamut will re-enter the arena and enter his final phase. Bahamut's final phase will last until he is dead, and is largely a race against his enrage timer. Bahamut will no longer use Flatten or Flare Star, but still uses Flame Breath, Mega Flare, Earth Shaker, and Giga Flare. He also gains a few new moves. I recommend tanking him in between the middle of the room and the wall in whatever direction you're most comfortable with. The first attack Bahamut will use is Morn, his new tank killing attack. When he begins casting this on the main tank, a tether will spawn, linking him to the nearest player. If the linked player is within the blast radius of the attack, they will split the damage dealt by it. For this reason, your off tank will stand with the main tank on most Morns. Morn hits multiple times per cast. The first hit always deals about 20,000 damage split between the 2 players hit before mitigations, and each subsequent hit deals about 8,000 split damage. Also, every time Bahamut uses Morn, he will do an extra blast. So the first Morn hits twice, the second hits 3 times, the third hits 4, etc, etc. You will need a solid cooldown rotation in order to properly survive the ever-increasing Morns. For the cooldown rotation our tank used, you can check the Google Doc in the description of the video. I will make note that on the second Morn, our warrior provoked and holmganged the attack, eating it alone but surviving due to holmgang's effects. To ensure he didn't die to an auto attack afterwards, the paladin used cover on him and ensured to be in range when the auto attack came out, before provoking it back. We also used hollow ground on our final Akmorn, the 5th one. After Akmorn, Bahamut will use Mega Flare. This Mega Flare is largely similar to the one from Phase 2, with a few additions. For one, sometimes 2 towers will spawn instead of 1, and each of them must have at least 1 person hit by them. Again, timed AoE heals are vital to surviving the stacked Mega Flare plus towers here. Additionally, during Mega Flare, Bahamut will send out 2 tethers onto random raid members. When Mega Flare ends, these tethers will hit whoever they are on with Tempest Wing, a giant twister that deals high damage to the targeted player. If someone with Tempest Wing gets too close to other players, they will stun them, place a powerful dot on them, and knock them back, potentially into the wall. It's recommended to have both of your tanks run circles around Bahamut's hitbox until they each have a tether, and then ensure to stand away from the raid and each other and take the hit. After Mega Flare, Bahamut will use Earthshaker. This attack is mostly unchanged. However, Bahamut will also target both of the marked players with Tempest Wing tethers. You can handle this in 2 ways. The first is to just have both tanks grab the tether like before. Just be wary that Bahamut does a Flame Breath immediately after this, so the main tank will take a lot of damage here. The other option is to have the off tank take 1 tether and one of the DPS targeted by Earthshaker take the other. This will require some on-the-spot communication for healers, but is easily survivable once you get the hang of it. Another change to Earthshaker is that the puddles persist for much longer, about 1.5 minutes to 1 minute and 45 seconds. This is why we practiced the triangle formation for them before, so you ensure not to run out of space to place them. Every 2 rotations of Akmorn, Mega Flare, and Earthshaker, Bahamut will use Giga Flare before immediately Akmorning the tanks. Mitigate this attack as you would any other raid-wide DPS and you should be okay, but be prepared to heal the tanks immediately after Giga Flare for Akmorn. Bahamut will continue this pattern as his Akmorns become more and more threatening until about 14 minutes into the fight. At this point, he will enrage and spend the next 15 seconds performing a much longer casting Giga Flare. If you do not kill him before it casts, it will wipe the raid. And that's it for my guide to turn 13 of the Binding Coil of Bahamut. Thank you everyone for watching. Hopefully this guide was useful to you. If it was, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Final Fantasy XIV information, news, guides, whatever. And until next time, guys, take care.